Hello everyone, I'm back again, and this time I would like to review the Xbox Series S. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking, you have the Series X, why would you buy the Series S? Well, I didn't actually buy it, and let me explain. So, while I was trading in some old technology that I didn't really need anymore, an old computer monitor among other things, I went to my local pawn shop and they had one there. And they did a direct swap for me, so I didn't actually end up spending anything. So, yeah. And again, I'm surprised that I found this thing because even though they're the easiest to find, they're still pretty hard to find. With that out of the way, let's get into this. So, I've had the Series S now for a little over 2 weeks, and I have a lot to say about it. And what inspired this this video this video is all this negative talk surrounding the Xbox Series S. So I wanted to give my own perspective on the Series S because I personally think that what everyone's saying about it, about how bad it is, about how, hold on a second, guys. My screen faded there. About how, unfuture-proofed it is, yada, yada, yada. I'm here to put a little bit of that to rest. But first, let's get the bad out of the way, because there is some bad things about this console, and it's best to talk about them up front. But before I do that, I really truly think that everyone in the media, and then some, is underestimating the Series S. So let's get the nitty-gritty out of the way. It does have significantly less power under the hood than the Series X has, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. My feeling behind this is that Microsoft wants to cater to people who don't care about having the best of the best, who don't care about all of that, and they just want to stick to a strict budget and not have to worry about spending their entire paycheck just to get a Series X. Now, there are a few drawbacks to the Series S. The first and foremost is space. And I'm sure that everyone's talked about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. It's unfortunate, but true. In my previous review of the Series X, I talked about how 200-something gigabytes is allocated for the operating system, or the, of the Series X itself, which means you only get about 800-something gigabytes of the 1 terabyte of space. The same applies to the Series S. The Series S, however, only has 512 gigs, which means 200 of that is absorbed for your operating system, which means you only get maybe 300 and something gigabytes. Ouch. That's not a lot of space to play with, especially if you play Call of Duty, which takes up a whopping 100 and something gigabytes with patches and things. At the present, there are only 2 ways to combat this. The first is to buy yourself an external drive, and store your games on there. However, you can only store them on there, and you can't actually play them in full fidelity, like if they're Series X games. If they're Series XS games, which are actually optimized for the console, then you can only store them on there, and it won't take full advantage of the capabilities your system has to offer. Also, it won't play from your external drive, so you're going to have to transfer it back to your internal drive. So you're going to have to do a lot of inventory management if you select that route, but that route is significantly cheaper, so keep it in mind. However, if you don't want to take the cheaper route, you can always buy their proprietary SSD. Now, their proprietary SSD is still extraordinarily expensive, at almost $300 a pop. And, it should be noted, though, that some games, such as Halo Master Chief Collection, don't require the Xbox's SSD to really take advantage of the next-gen features. But you should still, keep in mind that that's few and far between. And, normal external drives can go all the way down to $60 over Black Friday or some sales and whatnot. So, I truly feel like you save yourself a lot of money by doing it that way, because you could spend, say, $300 on the Series S, and then you could spend $60 instead of another $100, which you ironically probably would have spent on the Series X anyway. Look for sales, guys. Look for sales. The next disadvantage, if you can really call it that, is that the Series S here only does 1440p maximum, and it cannot do native 4K, and sometimes it even downsamples to 720p. Now, unless you're pixel peeping, I'd argue that you'll never ever notice this. In fact, ironically, with it at 1440p right now, it looks sharper than my 4K, or sorry, yeah, it looks sharper than, like, you know, when I have it set to 4K on my Series X, or at least I attempt to. But that being said, it does say that the system supports 4K, but it doesn't support native 4K. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that your 1440p will be upscaled to 4K and not the other way around. But really, the most ideal resolution for this console is 1080p with HDR 60 frames per second, but 1440p is the highest that it can or should go. And believe it or not, this console is much more popular than, you know, a lot might think. However, it does have significantly less RAM and teraflops. Now, before everyone starts going on about how much more powerful the Series X is, teraflops is not a good measurement to measure consoles with, because less teraflops doesn't necessarily mean less performance. Another downside to the Series S is that the only way to play games is digitally. Now, some of you are not going to see this as a downside, and honestly, with the way that the Xbox ecosystem is, I don't really see it as a downside either, because when you insert a disc in the disk drive system, it'll automatically download whatever file it needs from online before you can even play the game. So it's not actually installing it from the disk, even if you own the disc. Also known as DRM, and Xbox uses DRM for almost everything. Okay, so that's everything bad that I can possibly think of with the Series S. Now let's talk about the good, and there's a lot of good things about this console, believe it or not. The Series S is a minimalist dream, guys. It can fit into almost anywhere, and the design is just beautiful and compact. I am quite honestly in love with this design, and I love the design ironically more than the Series X design because it's not as behemoth or refrigeratory. And traveling with this thing is so easy. Like, you can, just like where you can fit it into almost anywhere, you can literally fit it into almost anywhere. Bags, backpacks, you name it. It is so small. Like, just to give you an idea as to how small this thing is, just get up for a second. So, this is my laptop here, guys. It's a 15-inch laptop, and that's next to the Series X. Or sorry, Series S. The Series S is really, really small. It's not even as tall as my gaming entertainment cabinet here, but another way you can kind of look at this is, take a look at this. This is the Arctis Arctis 7X wireless box, and look, it's not even as long as it. It's a little bit taller than it, but the thickness is about the same. It's really tiny, and that's a good thing. It's honestly fantastic in design. I have nothing but good things to say about the design of this console. It's fantastic. Okay, getting back to it before I gush too much. So, I know a lot of people are confused about this, but guess what? The Series S can, in fact, do ray tracing. Yeah, a $300 machine can do ray tracing. It might scale back to 1080p to accomplish it, but who cares? Arguably, you're still getting the same amount of fidelity, even if you're not getting, like, you know, those 4K crisp graphics. You're still getting 1080p crisp graphics, and you still get the ray tracing that you want. The Series S also supports Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision. So a $300 machine, just to recap, does ray tracing and Dolby Vision and Atmos. That's crazy if you think about it. You would have to spend so much more money on a PC with equal capability, or even to get a digital PS5, you'd need to spend at least at least $100, possibly even $200 more, depending on if you buy through a scalper or if you buy legit. So, yeah. The Series S also does not lose any speed despite being a lower spec console overall. It's still just as fast as its sibling, the Series X, and it's just as fast as even, or just a little bit behind the PS5. So again, you're not really losing anything if you buy the Series S instead of the Series X, at least arguably anyway. Pardon me, guys. And arguably, if you have an HDMI 2.0 TV, the Series S is arguably the perfect console for you because it runs perfect on HDMI 2.0 TVs and or ones with 1080p resolution. So if you haven't made the jump to 2.1 yet, you're not losing anything by buying a Series S over the Series X. The only thing you lose is 4K and slightly more RAM and power when it comes to processing. Whether or not that'll make a difference to you, though, will depend on the type of gamer you are. And as I've talked about to the death, but I'll say it again, the Series S is significantly cheaper and so much easier to find than the Series X. The Series X is so hard to find right now. It's so hard to find, in fact, that as PS5s drop in price, the Series X remains high in price because they're so hard to come across, which is ironic because a couple of months ago I could find them easily at my local store, no problem, which is weird. Now, mind you, I live in Canada. Maybe that makes a difference. The Series S also supports VRR and FreeSync, just like the Series X does, so you don't even miss out on that capability either. Pardon me. And so, you know, hold on a second, guys. So, yeah, you can still have that buttery smooth gameplay. So, and this, guess what? Even that little box over there can do 120 hertz refresh rate. Now, it does knock your resolution down, but who cares? You get 120 hertz if your TV supports it. And developers continue to support this console. Regardless of what the media or anybody else says, developers are constantly optimizing and patching games to run on the Series S. Will they run as good as the Series X? No. But will it be that much of a drastic difference? I'm doubting it. You still have the SSD, you still have VRR, you still have 120 hertz, you still have Dolby Vision, you still have Dolby Atmos. What more can you really ask for? Now, what about the One X, I hear all of you asking? Interesting question. And then another one, I can hear you asking, if I own a One X, is it worth upgrading? Or if I don't own the One X, is it better to buy the Series S or the One X? So let's get into that. The One X can do native 4K, it's true, but at the sacrifice of frame rate. So often you'll get 4K, but it'll be knocked down to 30 frames per second or 1080p at 60 frames per second. The One X has a standard hard drive, meaning that the load speeds by comparison are abysmal. Also, despite having more RAM on the One X, it runs on significantly outdated hardware and is very slow to load games. It's very slow to install games. Everything runs slower. And because it runs on such outdated hardware by this point, it cannot run ray tracing or even quick resume, which again, the Series S can also run quick resume. So, geez, you know, like, what are you actually missing by jumping up to the Series X? Now, you may eventually be able to run Series X games on it using the cloud, but I have my doubts as to how much fidelity that'll actually have, because streaming for everything, at least in my experience, is never as good as having it run on the hardware itself, because you are limited by servers and you're limited by how much bandwidth your internet can handle. Now, one advantage that the One X might have over the Series S is that it has a disk drive, but arguably, when you insert a disk into the disk drive on even the Series X, it will automatically download the data from whatever server it is that checks in with Microsoft, and only then can you play the game. So you're not actually installing the game from the disk, you just own the disk. You don't own the game because of DRM. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that very well, but yeah. So I disagree with what the media is saying about this console. I consider the console a real lovely gem of a console, which is significantly underrated. It may be less powerful, but that isn't a factor here. It taps into part of the market that Sony and others have largely ignored, and it's such a budget-friendly console. And what makes this console even more enticing is Game Pass, because then you can download them, will download games and then delete games at your leisure, and literally, like, you'll either use up a ton of your space or you'll use up none of your space. To sum up, to have like a $300 console that can do ray tracing, VRR, 120 frames per second, 1440p resolution, and have Dolby Vision, HDR10, and Atmos is a steal. Not to mention the wicked fast SSD that you're going to have. You would pay hundreds of dollars more for a PC with comparable specs, and or $200 or $300 more for other consoles. So who is this system for? Well, it's for those of you who just want an Xbox for, well, no. Let me put this out there. This is who I think it's for. It's examples of who I think it's for, not necessarily who it's for. So let's say, for example, you already own a PS5, and all you really want is your Xbox exclusives. Well, but you don't want to spend the full pop on the Series X, then you can buy the Series S and still have access to those exclusives via Game Pass. Or if you don't care about 4K and don't want to wait around for a Series X, get the Series S. You will not be losing anything other than native 4K and slightly more power under the hood, at least in my opinion. So, it's a good upgrade for you. What if you have the One X and you're thinking of upgrading? The Series S is a good upgrade regardless. Now, maybe those of you who own the One X still want the creme de la creme, though, so maybe wait for the Series X, but otherwise, I'd say you're not losing anything by going for the Series S. For those who want a minimalist setup and something that's easy to carry around, Series S 100%. I'm not even kidding. It is so small, so easy to fit into anything. Bags, not pockets, bags, backpacks, suitcases, cabinets, small cabinets, medium cabinets, whatever. You can make it fit. It's literally that easy. And so yeah, if you want something like that, then this console's for you. Or how about if you just want to jump into next gen, but you don't care about having all the bells and whistles? This, 100% this. Just know what you're getting into. In which case, here's my recommendation for you. For your Series S games, download them, and when you're done with them, delete them from the internal drive. Buy an external drive for cheap and store any games that you want to store on it, and then copy them back over when you need to, and store all your last gen games on the external drive as well. If you really want to go all out, then buy the SSD, but I don't recommend it. Really, it's only another 800 and something gigs because the SSD needs to be formatted, so you're not actually getting 1 terabyte of space at all. So yeah. But I digress. This console, you mark my words, will be much more popular than everybody thinks it will. In fact, I'd go as far as to say, if I didn't already own the Series X, and I found this at my pawn shop just like I did the other day, or if I even just had bought this out of my own pocket, I'd be happy with it. It does everything I need it to, except for 4K and maybe a little bit of extra, horsepower under the hood. I would have been perfectly fine with this console. Now, mind you, I'm more of a disc-based player, but because disc-based games don't really matter anymore on the Xbox ecosystem, it's arguable that you even need it. This console is going to, I think, blow everyone away with how successful it will actually be. And all those news outlets talking negatively about it now, how it's not going to hold up or whatever, they're going to have to rewrite their articles. And to sum up, I think if you buy the Series S, full accepting and knowing what some of its drawbacks are, you will not be disappointed. Power-wise, it's not a monolith like the Series X, but it's just as good, even with the caveats, and at a much cheaper price. One other thing you should know is that the Series S does not come with an HDMI 2.1 high-speed cable. It only comes with an HDMI 2.0 high-speed cable. Whether or not that'll make a difference to you, I'll leave that up to you. And that's my review of the Series S. If you like this video, smash the like button. If you didn't, smash the dislike button if you think I'm a big nerd. Ding that bell if you want to see what I come out with next. I admit that I'm sometimes slow on the uptake to get videos out, but I try to make sure that every video that I launch is relevant to you. But what do you think? Are you going to buy a Series S or are you going to buy a Series X? Leave me a comment down below. Again, I don't think personally you lose anything by going with the Series S, and I think it's a fantastic console. But I digress. Stay healthy, stay safe always, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.